Hi there, I'm Kim Wardle, EVP of Design and Innovation Partnerships at TDA, the Design Product and Tech Talent Agency. And even though finding top talent is our day job, we also love giving back to our community by bringing you the TDA Talks, where we interview leaders and dive into the future of design, innovation, and leadership. And today, I am thrilled to welcome our guest, a key leader in shaping the future of commerce, Carl Rivera, Chief Design Officer at Shopify. Hi, Carl.
Hey, Kim, I'm so excited to finally be here.
Finally, thank you. Now, I want to get started because it's probably no surprise that I have a lot of questions for you
Ah,
today. But before we dive in, I would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about your background and the role you're in today at Shopify.
yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm from Sweden. That's the accent. I've lived in
Yeah.
New York for the last 10 years, and the last seven of those have been spent with Shopify. I came into the company through an acquisition. They acquired my company, a marketplace called Ticktail. And my first role here was to introduce Shopify's consumer offering, which became Shop. Some of you have used it, Shop App or Shop Pay. I then moved on into another product role, leading merchant services, which is really like all of the kind of like financial products from payments to banking and lending and taxes and shipping. So really spent the bulk of my career doing product work.
Yeah.
Um, and then about 6 months ago, I got a call from Toby, our founder and CEO, and we were talking about the future of the company and specifically how AI is impacting how we need to rethink all aspects of Shopify, kind of reimagine it from a blank canvas. And Toby said, look, whenever you're faced with ambiguity and it's hard to tell what the future will bring, the best way to imagine the future and to bring it into today is through design. And it's time for Shopify to reinstate the role of Chief Design Officer and really use design as a wayfinding mechanism, a tool for us to navigate this new space, this new paradigm that we find ourselves in. And for me, that was a super, super exciting ask and invitation because I started my career in design. I
Yeah.
worked through agency and did branding, but then I moved over to entrepreneurship and business and product leadership. And so for me, really like stepping into this role was also going back to where my career started. And I think you'll find as we talk about different things, I think how I'm approaching this role and this opportunity and design leadership overall is really the meeting between business strategy, product development, and the aesthetics of the actual user experience.
Yeah. Interesting. You've had such a unique career path then, like
Yes.
founder, investor, innovator,
Yeah.
design. But what pivotal moments do you think have shaped you as a leader and your leadership style?
You know, it's funny how people always think about the most pivotal moments kind of being things when you had a eureka moment or something went really well and you figured something out. And I actually find that the most pivotal, important moments of my career and many careers is when you're just about to hit rock bottom. And so I ran this startup, and for the first 3 or 4 years, we were growing like a rocket ship. It was just like everything we did went our way. And then we ran into a bunch of hardships. I made a number of really poor business decisions, and it really put the company off track. And for the next 3 to 4 years, every week was a struggle to meet payroll, to make the business actually like survive for another week, another month. We had to go through layoffs and then another layoff and then another layoff, pivot on pivot, all to kind of figure the business out. And I was so self-identified with the company I was running. And so as the company was hurting, I was personally really hurting. And you know, it wasn't a single night with a good night's sleep, but like really stressed. I was like taking over. But coming out of that, I think I've learned so much that really shaped me into the leader I am today about persistence, about prioritization, about deciding what's truly important and what really matters, about holding on to a vision, about showing up as a leader, especially when it's difficult. And so you know, I think in everything that's hard, there's a gift also. And for me, going through this really difficult period in leading a business is the thing that has shaped me the most as a leader.
Wow. Wow, you really have been through it. And I guess for you then, now that you're at the top of the tree in design and obviously within the business, how do you coach and empower the leaders within Shopify, within your teams to scale themselves?
Yeah, totally. Well, look, I think ultimately it's every person's own job to really like drive their path and their career forward. I think what my role in all of this is to actually create just an environment where you're able to do really great work,
Mm.
because it's the work that is meant to move you forward. And I think we get this wrong in most companies, and this is perhaps a controversial take. We find that the leader's job is to kind of like coach you how to show up and to navigate the company and the politics and the organization and how to respond properly to an email or make yourself heard at a meeting. And I don't think that's my job, and it's definitely not how I'm showing up to any of my direct reports. My job is to create an environment where each member of my team is empowered and enabled to produce the best work of their careers. And by producing that work and being an environment where that work is celebrated, that work will move them forward and bring them into, new contexts and new challenges. And I really think that's the important thing to ground us in. It's like we're here to produce outstanding results, and by doing so, we're going to go on a journey together that moves all of us upwards.
Love that. That's really interesting. And one of the things that I hear a lot of at the moment is how design can really connect to the business. And obviously, you've played well, you've been wearing a lot of hats
Yeah.
within your time. And now as an executive stakeholder, what's your approach to aligning design with the business strategy at Shopify?
So I think that right now they're indistinguishable. Like you have to really think about what are we trying to bring the business to, and how does that express itself in a UI.
Mhm.
And I try to think about it as levels, and I constantly like try to push our teams and our designers to consider the highest level. And so let me walk through levels. Like the lowest level is that you sit inside of Figma and you look at a problem you're solving and you consider it out on the basis of, does this look nice?
Mhm.
The next level on top of that is to say, well, I'm not looking at it inside of Figma and wondering if it looks nice. I'm considering the user and how they're stepping into seeing this experience on their phone and experiencing it in real life. Are they sitting on a bus? What's their, what's the environment? Where are they coming from? What did they just do before? And how does that, influence what this interface needs to tell them?
Mhm.
Perhaps a layer up from that is sort of, well, where's the company going? Like, what's important to the company? And it's not just like where the user is today, but like, where are we shifting as a company? Maybe we're evolving our offering from being strictly commerce to shifting into banking or something else.
Yeah.
Like, how are we as a company moving through this world? And then you have another layer on top of that, which is like, where's the world going? And it can be more of the macro trends to say like, well, AI is going to come just meaningfully change how interfaces behave, but more than that, it's going to change what it means to have a job or what kind of job opportunities exist. And I think the higher rung level that you can consider in approaching your design work, the more strategic it becomes, and usually the better it is. And so it's really a practice, and it comes with seniority, right? Where you're able to start to like abstract yourself away from the bottom layers and start to think about the top layers, which is then the thing that's always important to stress with this is that people that sometimes do this, they then stop to think that the bottom layer stops mattering, and that's absolutely not true. Like you need to be able to look at where the world is going and think strategically about this, but then be able to distill it down into something that like pixel for pixel, like swipe for swipe, just
Mm.
feels amazing to hold and leaves you with an impression. Um, but it just depends on where you are in the design journey and being able to just work your way through these different levels.
Yeah. And obviously, Shopify powers millions of merchants
Yeah.
globally. How do you prioritize product development at such scale? It's like never ending.
Yeah. Well, I try generally to avoid frameworks because I think frameworks just skip so many important steps and simplify things into a place where they actually no longer have the fidelity to be useful to debate. But if there's one framework I do hold on to, it's this idea that like we should consider the very long term and the very short term. And so I really try as we go through roadmaps, like when we look at an area, I try to push teams to first develop a North Star vision. Where is this thing going over the next couple of years? And really be unconstrained by scope, by engineering resources, even what's possible with current technology at certain times. And just produce something that is visual, that is inspiring, that is strategic, and that kind of helps everyone dream a little bit. And the primary job of this is alignment. It's to say it's basically the equivalent of a strategy doc, only but by putting it into a prototype, you're avoiding the thing that always happens with strategy docs is that people imagine them in completely different ways in their heads. And so you get everyone aligned to the same version of the future. And then you take that North Star vision and you break it down not to, well, what does that mean for our 12-month roadmap or a 6-month roadmap? You skip the middle and you go into the very short term and you say, what does that mean for what we're going to do the next month? And that's the framework for me. It's like you should, as a company, operate on the very long term and the very short term, and as much as possible, cut out the middle.
Yeah. You make it sound very easy, Carl. Very simple and effective.
It actually somehow turns out to be simpler. Like
Yeah.
I find that people, it's a misunderstanding about interpreting the future that the
Yeah.
further ahead you look, the more blurry it becomes. It's actually the opposite. When you look very far ahead, the future is quite clear. Like, because we can understand these macro trends, like long before the iPhone existed, we could kind of anticipate that there would be smartphones and they would feel more like computers in their capabilities, and they would have a screen with a rich interface that was probably touch, right? Like we could interpret this before the iPhone was introduced. But it was very hard before the iPhone was introduced to say, I wonder which features are going to ship over the next 12 months for all of the different like flip phones providers that are out there. The middle is the murky territory. So as long as you stay out of the middle, you have clarity. You know what's going to happen tomorrow. You know where the world is going long term. The thing in between is like murky.
Yeah. Lovely. I love it. And what I'd love to know is, have you got a story that you can share with us? Either product design, a decision that you were against the grain, but it actually proved to be a breakthrough. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I used to run a consumer marketplace, and in doing that, I had a lot of different learnings about what works for consumer marketplaces. And one learning I arrived at was this idea that product discovery is product centric. And that when you consider what you want to buy, you first consider what product am I shopping for? And then additional values like which brand is behind this product are attributes to the product, not the other way around. And so a consumer shopping experience should lead with the product and then layer on all of the other attributes. And so when we developed Shop App and we started to go into shopping for Shop App, we took a product first approach to discovery. And so it was this feed, and it was like full of the different products that were kind of like picked for you. I was sort of operating just on past proven experiences. And it was the wrong choice. And I pushed the team in this direction because what we realized was that Shop App doesn't behave like a normal marketplace. In fact, it's much more like a mall than a marketplace. When you go to a mall, you go into this shopping center perhaps, and there are all of these different brands there. But when you go into each of those different brand stores inside of the mall, like you're no longer in the mall, you're inside of the store. And the brand owns that store experience, and they own the merchandising. They even have their own sales staff that's there to represent the brand in the right way. And I learned that Shop is actually much more like a mall than like a marketplace. And that product discovery inside a Shop app should be brand-led, not product-led. And so we completely shifted the discovery model to be these merchant cards that you now swipe through that can contain different information, different assets from the merchant, but it's about the brand and the merchant first, and secondary is the products that they offer. And it was so interesting for me because I'd hold on to like a thing that I thought to be a universal truth, and I held it so strongly because it had been such a painful learning for me. And you realize that like there are very few universal truths. Like context is so important to the thing that you're building.
And where do you see commerce evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? And how is Shopify preparing for it?
So I think the main thing around like how commerce is evolving is that there will just be more of it.
Right.
And I'll use this example because we're heading into this agentic era of commerce where we're going to be shopping through Perplexity and ChatGPT and Gemini and all of these different things. And you'll be saying, hey, I'm looking for a gift for my 5-year-old daughter, and it's going to like know me and figure out like the things that I can buy from it. And that's going to be a new form factor that will have the equivalent impact on commerce as mobile did, probably 10 years ago. But the conversation so often shifts into being like, oh, so is it going to replace online stores? But if you actually look at what happened with mobile and desktop, it's not that mobile replaced desktop traffic. Like on absolute terms, desktop traffic is up. It's just that mobile increased the amount of commerce happening so much that it eventually became the dominant form factor. And I think that's really the land we're still in. Like there's going to be multiple modalities for commerce, more and more, but they're actually increasing the pie overall. And there's just more ways to shop. And when there are more ways to shop and there are more modalities to shop from, then I think you start to think about like, okay, what are the things that tie it all together? And I think identity is going to be huge. And really like how do you inform whichever surface you're on, who you are and what shopping preferences you have and sizes and shopping addresses and payment methods and so forth. And I really think one of the products that we offer in the market, which is Shop Pay, is going to play a key role in this development, in tying it all together. And then the final thing I think is what I would perhaps call like composable experiences. Because when shopping now happens in more places, I think the experiences will also blend together. So I go into a retail environment, but maybe I complete the checkout on my phone.
Yeah.
Or I start a shopping journey on ChatGPT, but at some point it's going to invoke a card that is the product details card and maybe hold a checkout inside of its interface. And so what you will want to do is to have these composable experiences where no matter where the shopping journey started or the context that holds it, it can invoke experiences from other places. So it can pull in the checkout from your online store into a retail environment, or it can construct the product details page inside of ChatGPT. And so I think you need to approach interfaces in this like very modular way where they can be put together, broken apart, and put into a new shape very quickly.
Very smart. Not good for shopaholics like me, making it so
No,
easy.
you and I both.
Now, let's talk about AI. Let's touch on that. Like we're seeing design teams evolve so much around AI. Constantly, new platforms coming out and new software. Within the design organization at Shopify, within your organization, what are the big shifts that you're seeing in specific roles when it comes to AI and design and future technology? What do you foresee? Like, is there entirely new roles going to emerge with that within the design ecosystem, do you think?
I think it's quite the opposite. I think there's generally a role consolidation happening right now where lines are blurring and for any craft, not just design, we're expected to be able to cover a wider breadth of tasks because we're aided in our work by AI.
Yeah.
And so one of the kind of frameworks I usually come back to is that like AI makes all of us a 7 out of 10 at every job. So like I'm not a lawyer, but if you really need a lawyer, Kim, I can probably be yours. Like I'm not a developer, but every weekend now I do development, right?
Yeah.
And I'm probably like a 7 out of 10 lawyer and a 7 out of 10 developer, just using AI to like basically like guide my every next step. That's also true for design, right? Like there will be now product managers or engineers that are 7 out of 10 designers. And so I think, this change blurs all of the lines and it kind of requires you and expects you to be able to cover a bigger, greater challenge and have more breadth. I think that what it really implies, though, is that there's now actually a higher bar on the craft itself. Because if you are a 7 out of 10 designer, you're not really adding much, right? Like you're basically just meeting the bar of AI. And so I think that what will happen is that yes, it will actually in some ways be more challenging in both perspectives, because we now ask you to cover more breadth, but we also ask you to have more specialization to really differentiate from the baseline that can now come from anyone inside of an organization. And so that's sort of how I think the role of a designer is evolving. And then if I look at our team inside of Shopify, so what are we doing? Well, we're now expecting every designer that joins our company to go through DevUp, which is our developer onboarding. As part of onboarding into the design tools at Shopify, you also onboard into our development environment. That's part of your onboarding. You're making 2 pull requests into production, just to really like understand the entire journey from creating something inside of Figma to actually deploying it to production. More and more of our design work starts in a vibe coding environment, where we're actually like coding against our production environment, and you can use real data, and you use the actual Shopify admin to bring your ideas to life. And I think that this also like just allows us to work in a much more integrated and closer way with our engineering partners and product partners, because we're all touching and holding the same thing, using the same tools.
Yeah.
And so I think we're heading into a world where lines are blurring, and what the implication of that is that it's more important than ever to have a sharp edge.
Yeah, definitely. Massively agree with you there. And also, Shopify is really known for a great culture, strong culture, but you're also remote, which
Yeah.
I know now a lot of companies are now going back to hybrid working or 5 days back in office. How do you maintain that culture within the team with you all, working from home?
Yeah. When I used to run a startup, I used to talk about our mission. And I talked about the mission in a way that startup founders talk about their mission. It's really important, blah, blah, blah. But it was in ways, to be completely honest, like sometimes sales talk.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a lot of talk about being a mission-led company. And I don't think I understood what that meant until I joined Shopify. So deeply ingrained in everything that we do is our culture of being merchant obsessed, of fighting to make commerce better for everyone. And I think we hold on to this idea that we are bending the curve of entrepreneurship. And as a result of our work, more people are able to pursue a vision, an idea, and turn it into reality, into a day job or a side gig. And I think, that's one part of our culture that I think is the grounding aspect. Like we're all here in service of something that feels important to all of us. And then I think the other part of it is that we're united by the work. And this is sort of where our conversation started today, which is that I think that great culture, is about producing great work. And I think there's nothing more inspiring and fun than being in an environment where great work is produced and shipped and used by its customers. And I find that companies that try to redefine culture into being something else, it becomes about like how we spend time together, or the offsite we did, or like the perks that you have, or whatever it might be. They miss the whole point, because those things are like band-aids to make up for something more fundamental that's not there or that's missing. And I think Shopify is just so deeply centered around the work that we do, the quality of the work, and then the implicit expectations that set on yourself and on your teams. And that's the thing that holds us together.
Yeah. I love that take on it, actually. It's an interesting one. And you've said all the positives. What about the biggest leadership challenges that you come up against? Obviously, maintaining such an alignment globally. What would you say the challenges are for you?
There are certainly tasks, challenges that where talking to someone through a screen is not sufficient, and where the fidelity of conversation over Slack or over Google Hangouts just fails to convey the detail that will like make something be so special. And so I think that is always challenging in a remote environment. That is always going to be challenging. But we've been trying to be very thoughtful and proactive in bringing together teams in person to have intentional meetups at the right times and at the right milestones for any given project. We have huge offices, wonderful offices. I'm in one right now in New York City, in all of the city hubs where we have a strong presence. And we make it really easy for teams to, no matter where they're located, to fly into these hubs and come together to have those like intentional meetups in a sort of self-serve way.
Yeah.
I try to make sure that teams that are working together are working inside of the same time zones, because even if you're remote, just being on the same schedule with the people that you work most closely with also helps. And so there are all of these like tiny small things that we consider to make this structure that we've chosen for our company be more effective. And I think that's how we kind of overcome it.
Yeah. Great. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that. Absolutely. And I'd love to know, you sound like an incredible leader. Are there any leaders that you really admire and why?
I will say, when I joined Shopify, I didn't think I was going to stay here for as long as I did. I've, been here for 7 years already.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is Toby, I have to say. Like, it's our founder and CEO. Like, I find that he's like a very high conviction, visionary leader who I think reflect the leadership values that I want to hold on to in a big way, which is, things you and I talked about today, like being focused on the mission, being focused about the work, cutting off all of the kind of like the cruff that gets in the way of that. I think if you zoom out a little bit, and what I think makes Toby an inspiring leader is how entrepreneurial he is. And if I look at the company and what have defined many of the people that have been the most successful leaders here, it's people that come from similar backgrounds to me, right? Like, they've had an entrepreneurial experience where you were willing to stick your neck out and take a lot of risk in order to get to an outcome that you were willing to fight for. I adore and look up to entrepreneurs so much. My mother was a ceramist, and she ran her own business her whole professional life. And I think, just growing up, looking at her building her company was always an inspiration for me. My wife now, Baba, runs an incredible hair care brand called Ceremonia.com. And I see her run that business while raising our kids. And I'm so inspired by that. I think for me, the most inspiring leadership is that. It's the leadership that's founded in entrepreneurship and the strive to turn a passion or something you believe in into something that's real.
That's so lovely. And what about if you think of your younger self, if you could give one piece of advice to that person, or, people looking to start out in the industry, whether that be product design, engineering, what advice would you give to those people?
I would say that they should trust their instincts and stick their neck out, and don't be afraid to debate and try out the edges of things. But fight for what you believe is good. Because the default is the status quo. And the default is like finding alignment in the average, in the thing in the middle that everyone can agree to. And it's really only when someone decides that it's worth their time and energy, where it's worth the personal risk of having an idea that not everyone agrees to, that something special can be created.
It sounds like you are very successful, but I love that you've also told us, it hasn't always been an easy ride. What's a recent failure or an experiment that's taught you something to be really vulnerable?
I think to speak to this in a more general way, because I can't come up with a good recent example other than some of the product failures I already mentioned to you earlier in the podcast, because trust me, I've had my fair amount of failures here. But really where I find that I stumble the most still is when I actually skip the step of using the product.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that it's so easy to become an executive or to become a manager or a leader, and you're so involved in so many different things that you start to trust the thing you're seeing on the screen, and you start to like trust the thing that's being presented to you. And I think that like there is no way to actually have an opinion about a product experience without holding it or using it or seeing it through the eyes of a real user. And whenever I sometimes think that I don't have time for that, I wake up to then find the product in the market or see someone else use it for the first time, and I have regrets, and I feel,
Right.
I feel like I failed myself, and I failed my job, and I failed Shopify and the company. And so that's really like the step that like can like hold the thing that you're working on, like understand it through the lens of a customer, like get your hands dirty.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And thank you so much for all those insights, Carl. Um, I've got so many other questions that I would love to ask you, but I know we're going to run out of time. But we've heard a lot about you and your role in your career and your role at Shopify. Can you tell our audience one thing that not many people know about you? Maybe not related to work, something
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, perhaps one thing I'll say, as I've become older, I have become way, way, way more spiritual.
Right?
And I find that it's an interesting thing because when you're young, you want, or at least I grew up in Sweden, which is a very secular country,
Mm,
and it felt cool to be an atheist, to be like, science can explain everything. And I'm a very kind of like rational technology forward person who believe deeply in man's ability to innovate and to research and to learn things through science and through the scientific method.
mm,
But then as I get older and I have kids and you start to kind of think about the wonders of the world, I must say, like, I am now much more deeply spiritual and spiritually curious. And I'm looking for those things to hold on to. And it's become clear to me that I want my kids to grow up in some kind of spiritual or religious framework.
mhm.
And it's this interesting, I'm on this interesting path right now where I'm trying to basically choose a religion.
Right.
Because typically I think it's something you're born into or raised inside of. And it's not, it's for me it's coming from the other way. It's something that I want to embrace. And I'm trying to choose which spiritual or religious framework in the same way that you would be choosing which movie to watch one year. Like I'm trying, it's an interesting process to go through
Yeah.
where you're selecting from like what do they stand for, what locations do they have, like what are the rituals or ceremonies? Like you're like really trying to think like what's the right fit for me. But
Yeah.
that's a phase that I'm in right now, which I find to be quite interesting and amusing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much again for all your insights. Carl, Shopify are hiring a lot at the moment with the design team. Is that right? People need to
Yes,
keep an
yes,
eye
yes.
out for
We're
those
definitely
roles.
expanding the team. And look, one thing I'll plug here is that Shopify, we're hiring senior design IC roles primarily. Really people that can cover an entire user journey end to end and think strategically about the future and what it holds. But we also appreciate that in the market right now, there's been this change and shift towards most companies like Shopify really favoring these like more senior roles.
Hmm.
And it's actually become in ways harder than before to enter into the design market. And so we launched the design apprenticeship program. It's called DAP, and you can find it if you Google it, which creates this wonderful paid internship format where you spend 6 month rotation with one team being paired with some of our best design leaders, and then another 6 months on another team being paired with different design leaders. And at the end, there's an opportunity to qualify for a permanent role at Shopify. But either way, it's giving you that platform where you've had direct work experience, solving real problems, shipping real products to users, that we think to be a very good and important entry point the way the market is shifting right now.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, we'll definitely share the details as I share this out on social. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But again, thank you, Carl, and thank you so much to our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Kim. Great chatting.
Thank you.